Okay, so we went through the introduction, and now we can begin with chapter 1. Parak Aleph, chapter 1. Hine kvar muvor ba'arichus bekuntris miyuchad beprate ofnei hahispailus b'moach v'lev u'machshava shenolad min hahisvananus lefi seder himadregos naranchai chulu. Now, it was already explained in a particular pamphlet. I was explained the particular types of excitation of the mind, the heart, and thought which result from contemplation, according to the 5 levels of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yichida, etc. What's going on over here? The particular pamphlet being alluded to was also written by the Mitler Rebbe. It's called Kuntres Hayispailus, the tract on excitement, or really excitation or arousal. There are a lot of different things the Mitler Rebbe explains there, but the bottom line point, especially in connection with our work here, is that genuine excitement about matters of godliness are possible only and proportionate to one's knowledge of godliness, particularly his knowledge of the subject we're studying here, how he brings existence into being from nothing constantly. And otherwise a person could, heaven forbid, be fooling themselves. So for example, let's say somebody pays you $20 to jump up and down and have a big smile on your face and rave about how much you love some product. I don't know, some new toothbrush or whatever, it doesn't really matter. And you're getting all excited, woohoo, this is the best, I can't believe it, it's incredible, and all that other stuff. But the bottom line is, although there is an emotional excitement there, it is definitely not genuine. So the point is, to be really excited about God, a person has to learn about God by way of how he relates to the world. And if not, so of course they can hype themselves up, but bottom line is, it will not really be genuine. Okay, and the various layers of the soul, right? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yichida is just 5 names that describe the various layers of the self. And when a person does this contemplation, according to the degree of their study and knowledge, will be the degree to which they uncover higher layers of the self and heighten their awareness accordingly. And really that's what the Mitler Rebbe is explaining here, that the excitement comes in the brain, the heart, and the thought. And the brain corresponds to the intellectual powers, the heart to the emotions. Like we said before, really the emotions are often divided. There's an arbitrary division, of course, but between the heart and the gut, that's both included in the heart, and thought corresponds to Malchus, which, as we said, corresponds to speech, but also to thought. Corresponds to thought, speech, and action. We said Malchus, or kingship, relates to the external expression of something. Thought is the external expression of the intellect. Speech externally expresses the emotions. And action, I'd say mostly the heart emotions, and action expresses the gut emotions. The connection, by the way, to how speech reveals the emotions, I mean, you could tell, for instance, in the tone of voice. If a person's talking like this, so you know they're excited. If they're talking like this, kind of like I am now because I'm tired, so you know that maybe either they're tired or else maybe they're sad about something. Okay. But the bottom line, to stay focused on what we're learning here, and another pamphlet that Mitler Rebbe explained, the only way to have a genuine excitement about godliness is to study how he brings us into being from nothing, Now let's move to this pamphlet, which describes why that is, how it works, and after the first couple of chapters, the actual subject itself. Okay, there's going to be a little introduction over here we're going to have to give in order that you'll be able to reap the full benefits of the next few chapters. Okay, in the introduction we spoke a little about the 10 attributes. Now, given that our world is limited, each thing includes its opposite. So, for instance, there's within heat there's some degree of coolness, and vice versa. And that synthesis of opposites is what allows for the matter of degrees versus absolute. If you went to take a shower and you turned on an infinite cold, actually not only would the shower be destroyed, but actually the entire physical universe would be destroyed. And the reason that you can adjust it and that it's not infinite cold is because there's some heat in it. And same thing with the heat. And same thing with darkness and light and all that. So anyways, these 10 attributes, each of these 10 attributes include 10 attributes. So for example, in the intellectual powers of Chochmah and Bina, insight and analysis, there's the intellect of the intellect, and there's the emotions of the intellect. Okay, now we're going to have to borrow from Rabbi Lubavitcher. The intellect of the intellect, in other words, Chochmah, Bina, and Das of Chochmah, Bina, and Das, is pure objective analysis. Studying something in order to understand what it is. What is fire? What is whatever you're studying? And as yet, that's kind of like looking at something as a scientist. It's as yet disconnected from moral questions. Questions, pardon me please, of rightness or wrongness, good or bad. Just to understand what it is, that's it. Okay. Then you have the heartfelt emotion, so to speak, of chesed, kindness, gevura, severity, tiferes, mercy. What does that mean to speak of the emotions of the intellect? Well, because they're within the realm of intellect, they themselves are a form of intellect and not heartfelt emotions as we know them. The emotions of the intellect refer to intellectual leanings. So, for instance, a positive intellectual leaning would be chesed or kindness of the intellect. A negative intellectual leaning would be gevura or severity of the intellect. Okay. And then you have the gut emotions of netzach, victory, hod, submission, and yesod, connection or foundation. We called it communication earlier. These refer to the resolve to do something. So you may have the intellect of the intellect. You're studying something like a scientist, and you determine what it is. Then you ask the question, is it good or bad, right or wrong? You come to the conclusion that it's good. What you're going to want to do next is resolve within yourself to go ahead and, let's say, build that building. Or not. The resolve refers to the gut emotions of the intellect. And again, this is all within the realm of intellect. You haven't actually done anything. You're sitting in a chair just like mine, doing your analysis. You contemplated what something is, came to the determination, let's say, that it's a good thing, and therefore that you'll go ahead and do it. Let's say, the example we just gave, you go ahead, I'm going to build that structure. Okay, but you're still sitting here in your chair, you haven't actually done anything. Then it moves to the heartfelt emotions, etc. The first couple chapters here are dealing just in the realm of intellect, just describing the method of objective analysis, how to do it, what to do it on, etc. Okay, that having been said, let's begin. Okay, To backtrack a moment, the other pamphlet that this is in certain ways, so to speak, a continuation of, it was explained that a person must do hisbonenus, contemplation. And now we have to explain well the matter of contemplation and understand what it is in essence and what we should contemplate. Okay? Vehine mahus haisbonenus ba'etzem hu inyan haistakus hachazaka ba'amkus ha'inyan v'la'amod alav harbe ad sheyavino solaburav v'kol chalkav biprate pratius. Hisbonenus, or contemplation, which, as I said, I sometimes like to use the word analysis instead, just because it's shorter. There's no big deep reason there. Sorry to disappoint you. Contemplation, analysis, whatever. What it is it's the strong gazing into the depth of a matter and to stand on it very much till it's understood till it's understood clearly with all its minute details. Obviously, we're talking not about a physical gazing here, but a gazing of the mind. In other words, analysis. V'hu bechinas pnimius bina, hanikra b'lashon hagamar b'shem iyun. And this contemplation is synonymous. This is the inner aspect of the faculty of bina, understanding. Which, in other words, we're dealing here. What does that mean? The inner aspect of bina. Well, it means the intellect of the intellect, bina of bina. That's the inner aspect. The outer aspect is the emotions of it, the intellectual leanings and the resolve, and all that will be discussed later. So here we're talking about intellect of intellect, bina of bina, pure objective analysis, which is called in the Talmud iyun. Iyun means analysis. In Hasidic Kabbalistic terminology, we call it hisbonenus, which I'll translate now as contemplation. And the revealed levels of Torah, like the Talmud, we call it iyun, analysis. It's the same thing. Understanding something clearly through studying it in a very detailed way. Kamo shamar b'masacha sukkah, as we learn in Tractate Sukkah, in the Talmud, in other words, ha'al magaris v'ha'al iyune. There's girsa, surface study, and there's iyun, in-depth study. And now the Mitler Rebbe will contrast these two types of study in order to better clarify our definition of, well, if you want to break it down, iyun, analysis, and therefore hisbonenus, contemplation. Okay, here we go. Perush hagirsahu, the explanation of the term girsa, or surface study, hurak havanas hadavra b'hashkafa rishona, Shaholachas hanaves b'mehirus bilti ikuv v'ha'amada klal ke'adua. Oh, that's the next sentence. It's just understanding something at first glance, which is characterized by a rapid progression of the mind without pause and restraint at all in study. Ke'adua derech mashal, as is known by way of analogy. Hamabid be'eno al davar ma, ve'eno mizbonin klal al davar be'ichuso u'mahuso, ve'kol cholkav ha'pnimim v'chitzonim, rak derech ma'avir ba'alma. So by way of analogy, this is like someone who looks at something with his eyes, and he doesn't contemplate this thing at all with regard to how it works and what it is, with all its inner and outer parts. But rather he looks at it just in a passing sort of a way. Okay, now there'll be two effects from this, from looking at something just in a cursory sort of way. One effect will be immediate, and one effect will be long term. The immediate effect is he will not be able to communicate what he saw to someone else except in a very general way, because that's how he looked at it, in a general way. And over time, he'll forget it completely. Okay? Now let's read that inside. Shebameshech Zman, that over the course of time, Vada Yishkach Halav Legamri, he'll certainly forget it completely. And further, he will not be able to communicate to another Rak Klalius Inyan also Hadavar Shara Ba'avaras Ha'ayin V'lo B'tvius Ayin Klal. That matter which he saw with a passing of the eye and not with a fixing of the eye at all. Now the question is, why is that? Why is it that if a person will look at something just in a very quick sort of way, without really studying it, well, okay, if he only saw it in a general way, of course he can only communicate it in a general way, because you can only communicate what you understand and perceive, and he only looked at it quickly. But in terms of the memory, not sure exactly how it works, but it appears to me that perhaps the reason is this, that we tend to remember those things that we integrate into the self, and that occurs through unifying the thing with our mind, which occurs through grasping it to its depth, like getting the point of an explanation, which occurs through understanding its details, which the details make it concrete to us. Okay, so an idea. Anyways, that was an analogy. Let's get focused on what we're talking about here. V'kein ha'avaras ayin ha'seichel be'ezas svara ba'hashkafa rishona bilti ikuva madalayin bo heitav. And so too with the passing of the mind's eye, in other words the intellect, over a certain explanation, when that explanation is looked at just in a cursory, superficial sort of way, without pause and restraint to analyze it well, what will happen? A person will not know that explanation completely whatsoever. Okay, so we know the facts. The facts is there's two types of study. Studying something superficially and studying something in depth, in other words, in a detailed way. If a person will just study something superficially, they will not grasp the depth at all. As a result, they will not be able to communicate it to someone else, except of course in a very general way, immediately. And the long-term effect is that they'll forget it. Those are the facts, but we have to understand why it is that way. And as we'll go along, you'll start to see that many times this book itself and the whole style of presentation is a perfect analogy that for the concepts being learned. So for example, here the Mitler Rebbe